Yes. Deputy Catherine Murphy now on behalf of the Social Democrats.
Taoiseach, while COVID is front and centre in people's minds, and that's very understandable, there are other issues that are not getting the attention they're due to COVID that they need to get. One of those things are some of the jaw-dropping decisions that are being taken around the issue of housing. And I want to focus on one of those, and that's the long-term leasing of social housing. Incredibly, social housing is now being actively sold as a financial product. And I want to quote you from one website. There's no requirement to deal with tenants as local councils or housing agencies are the lessees. There is a hands-off situation with no risk of vacancies or the usual tasks associated with managing property lets. The cash comes directly from local government into your bank account, so there's no intermediary. It goes on to say, build a portfolio of approved social housing units, houses and apartments that will be rubber stamped by local councils and housing agencies for long-term leases. Sleep peacefully without worrying about stock markets. Your obligations stop at building insurance. There is no local property tax when leases are over or 20 years are over, end of quote. This model effectively means that the developer builds a housing estate, the 10% social housing, instead of the state purchasing that at cost price, is leased for 20 or 25 years with a 4-year rent review. The house is refurbished at the end, handed back to the developer, and presumably the tenant is chucked out. Part 5, which is now the dominant means of delivery of social housing, is increasingly and in some areas exclusively being delivered through long leasing. Are councils obliged to accept leasing if offered under Part 5? Do they really have a choice? The Minister for Housing tells us on the Dáil record that it's up to local authorities to decide, but it seems to be a take it or leave it scenario. I've been told on the Dáil record that there's been no change in policy. I have to ask, is the Dáil being told the truth, or are we being misled on this? Taoiseach, in addition, there is little transparency in the process on the planning files, and there will be thousands of these in place before people realise that they're being taken for complete fools. An example given on the Hobbs Financial website, a 2-bedroom apartment in Dublin 8. The investment, including all acquisition costs, is $290,000. After 25 years, you will have earned a rent of $520,000, a profit of $229,000, courtesy of the taxpayer, of course, and have a refurbished property and no property tax obligations, and there will be thousands of these. Taoiseach, this may not be a product of TACA or of the Galway tent, but it's right out of the same playbook. And my questions are, have you looked at the cost of this, and have you considered this from a societal perspective? What's your view in relation to social housing being sold as a financial product? You know, and will you change this policy?
Thank you, Deputy. Time is up.
Ending up with nothing at the end of all of this and postponing the housing list for another generation.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy.
Is that really?
Taoiseach.
First of all, I think the broad thrust of government policy in relation to social housing is to build social housing. And there's a whole suite of initiatives that we have taken. And the bulk of the construction next year will be, in terms of social housing and the provision, will be through the approved social housing bodies who already and have consistently been building social housing on behalf of the state, but also the councils themselves. And that will be the large bulk of the social housing output, the direct bills essentially, where councils commission and provide and allocate housing, along with the approved housing bodies. And last year, the bulk of the, I think it was 9,500 social housing would have been, the majority would have been in terms of construction. But there are a number of other mechanisms that will be used as well. But we have clearly said, and the Minister is clearly of a view, that the majority of provision has to be through direct bill and has to be through the councils themselves and the approved social bodies building houses, and also getting involved in affordable housing. But in terms of, we have to increase dramatically the output of social housing and the number of social houses that we make available. both in terms of direct build, Part 5s, and other mechanisms. In many respects, that will remain our emphasis and our focus. But we're not, we're going to pursue a number of avenues. We will continue to review those areas, particularly in terms of the cost-benefit analysis and what's most advantageous from the taxpayer's perspective and what gives value for money long term. But we do need more activity out there in the marketplace. We do need more provision for social housing than we have had over the last number of years. And that's what the government is committed to doing through a number of schemes and through a number of mechanisms. But however, there has been in the initial period, leasing is one of those options in order to get quick access to properties as well, particularly in terms of the homelessness issue in COVID, during the COVID phase, because I felt and we believe that there is an opportunity in the context of COVID to get the homelessness figures down and to get more permanent provision, particularly for single homeless, which is quite a significant proportion of those who are homeless. But predominantly it'll be the council commissioning the building of local authority and social housing and approved housing bodies. That's the broad thrust of policy.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Murphy.
I accept there needs to be quicker and more output. Don't think we disagree on that. That's not the issue I'm trying to raise here. I don't see the evidence on the ground, and housing is the #1 issue come through my door or on my phone and has been for the last 10 or 12 years. So I'm acutely aware of it. But this is the most expensive and least satisfactory way of delivering social housing. A financial product. Social housing is now a financial product. Look, I see no evidence on the ground of the scaling up. What I see is turnkey and I see long-term leasing. That's all I see in terms of how it's manifesting itself in my area. And increasingly, I'm seeing that in some of the Dublin authorities as well. Are you really certain about what you're telling us here? Has there been a shift in policy? Because I'm only seeing turnkey and long-term leasing, and increasingly it's long-term leasing, with the council being told take it or leave it, and it's been actively promoted by the department.
Deputy. Time is up. Thank you very much. Taoiseach.
Yeah, well, first of all, about 3.3 billion has been provided for housing. That's a 24% increase on budget 2020. Clearly, COVID in the first 3 months has restricted output. That's obvious because of the level 5 and our decision to reduce mobility. So it's had an impact on the first 3 months of the year COVID has had. But what the 3.3 billion is the highest investment in housing by any government in a single year. Now, 500 million in additional capital has been provided for the delivery of 12,750 new social homes. That's 12,750 new social homes for people on the social housing list. That's positive, of which 9,500 will be direct builds. You've picked one particular scheme which represents a minority of what will be provided and presented it as the main plank of government policy, which it is not. The main plank is 9,500 of 12,750, which will be new builds through the social, the approved housing bodies and through the local authorities. But I agree with you, we do need to get output up, and we have to use as many mechanisms as we can to get output up for social housing.
Thank you very much, Taoiseach. Time is up.
As well.
Thank you very much.